amazingly offensive, challenging you to think offensively, challenging you to be a part of the team. This is not regular interference. This is offensive interference. With the baldest man in entertainment, me, Nick Cellini. And welcome to another edition of Offensive Interference. My buddy B.A., Brandon Adams, is here with me. I got to be honest with you, B.A., and I want you to be honest with me in turn.
Okay.
That open is starting to get on my nerves.
Why is that?
I don't like my own voice. I'm not going to lie to you. I very rarely listen to stuff that I do because I just don't like the way that I sound.
I don't have a problem with it.
All right. You tell me if you
I
did
do
have a problem with
Can
it.
I also be honest with you about something?
Yeah, sure.
You look fantastic.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I love.
I got nothing else to do. I work out all day.
You've got this stubble thing going in the front, a little salt and pepper, which is very sexy. Don't think I didn't notice.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm going for.
A little stubble on the top. You look like it's sort of like your heel turn. You look like you're turning heel the way that the old wrestlers used to grow a little face.
When Hulk Hogan joined the NWO, what happened? The beard was black.
That's the way that you showed the fans. I'm turning heel.
You fans can stick it.
You grow a little facial hair. You look really, really good.
You know what the highlight of that NWO turn was? At the very end of the broadcast, Tony Schiavone saying, Hulk Hogan, you can go to hell, just as the pay-per-view ended. We'll talk some wrestling a little bit later on. There was a huge heel turn in the WWE, and I think another inevitable heel turn has to happen. If you really want to put the WWE over the top, similar to the NWO, somebody has to turn heel. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
That's a great tease. I can't wait for that.
Let's begin by talking about the Braves. As of this podcast, they've won 7 consecutive series, and obviously they're the best team at home, even though Dan Uggla has to go get LASIK surgery, even though B.J. Upton has been awful at times and is on the verge, as you stated the last time you were here with us, is on the verge of losing that job. It's going to go to Jordan Schaefer if this trend continues. Which
is such a significant move because of the money that he makes. We almost never see this in baseball. It may have happened more than I realized, but it doesn't seem like it's happened a lot where a manager says, I don't care how much money you're making. It's better for us to play somebody else. And that's really the point where the Braves are with B.J. Upton. It's pretty fascinating when you think about how many hoops you have to jump through to kind of get to that point.
And B.J. Upton even said, what's my argument?
Yeah.
I'm not hitting the baseball. I'm not doing anything right at the plate. And at times, he's botching his play in the outfield.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you that when things are going well and the team is winning, people are a lot more likely to kind of fall in line. If this is a 500 club or a losing record, B.J. Upton's a lot more worried about his own numbers and his own status as a major leaguer, I think. But because the team is playing so well, I think there is just a natural tendency to just kind of want to fall in line with the program and play from the bench if that's what Freddie Gonzalez needs for him to do.
What are your thoughts on Uggla saying, I need this surgery and I need it now?
I am very suspicious of Dan Uggla. There's just something about him that just doesn't feel right to me. You know, we're in this sort of cloud of performance-enhancing drugs, era where people who had really good numbers at one point in time and those numbers fall off, you can't help but be a little bit exactly what went on with this. There's just something about Dan Uggla that I can't take at face value. Is that fair to say?
I think a lot of times when people come to the Braves and they sign the deals with the Braves and they've had success elsewhere, like B.J. Upton, like Dan Uggla, like certain pitchers that have come through, I think a lot of pressure is on them that wasn't there in other organizations, pressure to perform because everybody knows what the reputation of the Braves is. Yes, they come up short a lot in the postseason, but more often than not, in fact, they're in the postseason.
Well, I think
cave to that pressure.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not media pressure because this is not a really intense media town, but there is organizational pressure because the organization itself sort of holds itself to such a high standard. And for somebody like Dan Uggla, it's one thing to be in Miami and hit a home run in a game or play well in a game. No game is really any different than another. It's another thing to come here and have to play well in a specific game when your team really needs you. And that's where that pressure comes in. I think that's probably a pretty good way to analyze what's gone on with some of these guys who have tried to come here and do this.
Pressure on this team to perform in the postseason. Let's all assume they're going to get there. How do you think the rotation is going to shape up?
Well, I love the two guys at the front end right now. Teran and Minor. Even though
young guys.
They are young guys, and they don't have that reputation that you expect. But you look at what Mark Bowman had a good blog on AtlantaBraves.com this week about, how well this rotation has done against other frontline pitchers. And I don't know, Nick, think about the National League playoffs over the last few years. When Wainwright stepped up for the Cardinals in 2006, no one would have necessarily expected him to do that before then. He kind of earned his way.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss. I guess is what you're saying.
Exactly. Or think about years ago, like Donovan Osborne, who did it for 1 year for the Padres,
right, for the Indians in '97.
Exactly.
Now, after that, it wasn't so good, but you're talking about in the here and now. Maybe they catch lightning in a bottle.
Right. So you're not necessarily asking one of these guys to become Bob Gibson for his career, but can they pitch well enough for a few weeks in October? Maybe I'm naive, but I sort of think 2 or 3 of these guys can. Minor and Tehran probably the 2 most likely candidates.
Beachy number 3 or Chris Medlin?
Well, I guess I would probably say Medlin from the standpoint of his mental makeup I really like. I know he hasn't been as strong this year as he was a season ago, but when you look at him and you think about how he's just tough, and I think that toughness is going to bode well for him in the playoffs.
I will tell you this, speaking of looking clean, confident, and sexy, that Brandon Beachy, kid's put together.
Yeah.
Got the stubble on the face.
Yeah,
See what you've made me do?
He's a sharp-looking guy. A sharp-looking guy.
I love how Fox has that slow motion now, and you could just watch his pitch and his delivery and how put together he really is. He's been doing a lot of weight work during his time down. Anyway, another conversation for another day. Speaking of a guy who did weight work, among other things, and performance-enhancing drugs, what the hell is going on with Alex Rodriguez? What the hell is going on?
He is a sad person to me because he doesn't seem capable of enjoying the life in which he was given. He's just, he's so self-destructive and he's so sort of eager to upend any good thing that happens in his life. I mean, he's going to be remembered as a little bit of a clown. That should not be the case when you're talking about one of the most naturally gifted baseball players you've ever seen.
And it's also got a touch of wrestling to it as well. His attorney is on the Today Show claiming this, that, and the other, like Paul Heyman.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, Matt Lauer has an envelope delivered to him from Major League Baseball. Well, here's the envelope. If you want to lift the curtain back, sign here. All of a sudden, Matt Lauer has become Vince McMahon.
Exactly, yeah. Look, the whole thing is just sort of pathetic. This is a guy who lied to protect himself, rat out anybody to sort of further his own.
He's the Henry Hill, as I said during one of our audibles last week. He's the Henry Hill of baseball. He's a rat.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy, and that's exactly what it is. And
isn't that what a rat is, Mr. Hill? A rat will do anything to survive.
And he's another one of these guys that's not going to be remembered, I don't think, fondly at all. Like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, he'll only be remembered for this stuff. And this is a guy who's hit more than 600 home runs.
Do you think he's been cheating since the get-go? I think he has. I think he's been taking stuff because, not to say he wouldn't have been successful without it, but I think he was so obsessed from the get-go with being known as the greatest ever.
By the get-go, do you mean dating back to Texas or back to Seattle?
I think
because
back to Seattle.
Clearly, in Texas he was. Maybe it was all the way back to then. I mean, that's the strangest part about this, because when you look at him, he doesn't look like he needs that stuff. He was a great fielding shortstop, a natural ability to swing the bat, but there's a lack of self-confidence there that would seem to make him want to do this kind of stuff.
All right, on the Krusty the Clown scale, who's the bigger clown? Alex Rodriguez or Ryan Braun? Because Ryan Braun dragged a lot of people through the mud, stood on his pulpit and pointed fingers at everybody.
Okay, here's how I'll answer that. I sort of laugh at Alex Rodriguez. He's sort of a sad, funny story to me. I hate Ryan Braun. The way that he dragged that poor urine sample taker, that's a guy's job. He collects urine from other people.
It's humiliating enough.
The fact that he dragged him through the mud, called him
anti-Semitic,
Cubs fan, anti-Semite. That's despicable. He's in that same category as Lance Armstrong, just a sociopath who will say and do anything to protect himself. He is a scumbag. I cannot stand Ryan Braun.
I think a lot of people, myself included, are in your corner. And I said this when he gave the speech a couple of years ago during spring training, saying I would bet my life, this, that, and the other. I said, look, for a guy that got off on a technicality,
absolutely,
you're feeling pretty good about yourself right now. It still doesn't explain. All right, let's just say that the vial, whatever the urine was stored in, sat overnight in the guy's basement. Would somebody sneak in and doctor the urine?
Go back and watch that video of him, saying all the things that he said. After it's over with, he's like hugging his teammates. It's all so melodramatic, and he's got that stupid hipster shirt on. He looks like a clown. I can't stand that guy.
It is what it is, but he's still going to make a lot of money. I will say this as well. He's making a lot of money, And real quick, as we wrap up the baseball talk, Albert Pujols done for the year.
Right.
33 years old, still has $212 million left on his deal. I go back to A-Rod. I go back to any major free agent signing. I never believed in breaking the bank for one guy like that. Very often, matter of fact, to me, more often than not, it backfires.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually listening to a podcast the other day, one of these baseball stat guys, when they were talking about how in baseball, the difference between one of these really good guys is potentially only about 7 or 8 wins a season, which is a lot of improvement. But that doesn't necessarily change the fortunes of a team if some other things go poorly. I think the one story that's going to come out of this, whether Pujols was juicing or not, we can all have our own opinions on that, is no one's
Careful, he'll sue you.
Right, exactly. Or if I'm a St. Louis radio host, I could be in a lot of trouble. None of these clubs anymore are going to give these 10-year deals to these guys in their 30s because without steroids, you just don't play well late into your late 30s without having some drop off in production. And we've been paying these guys based on what was happening during the steroid era. And now that kind of stuff is kind of getting out of the game a little bit. We see what a real 35-year-old or a 33-year-old actually does, and it's not worth $20 million a year.
You see Pujols as of late? He would test positive for lasagna right now. When we come back, he's a guy trying to come back from a major knee injury last year, had great chemistry with his quarterback, Aaron Murray. How's he feeling? I talked to Michael Bennett as offensive interference continues. Stick around.
ALS doesn't just kill you, it shuts you down, little by little, bit by bit.
It starts small. Maybe it's holding a pencil that gets difficult.
Or getting up from your chair.
Then you find it hard to turn the pages of your book.
Because you can't move your fingers.
Your mind keeps working, but your body doesn't respond.
You won't see it coming because no one knows where it comes from.
Soon you can't hug your mother or pick up your child.
You won't be able to tie your shoes.
You don't need to tie your shoes because now you can't walk.
You can't eat or shave.
Or laugh or sing.
First you can't catch the ball, then you can't catch your breath.
ALS doesn't just kill you.
It steals your life, a little bit at a time.
And it doesn't stop until there's nothing left.
Unless we stop it first.
Unless we stop it now.
I'm Steve Gleason. Let's put our heads together and find a cure for ALS.
Back here on Offensive Interference, Nick Cellini alongside my buddy Brandon Adams. Football season right around the corner. Georgia, as we all know, opening up the season against Clemson August the 31st. National television audience, 8 o'clock kickoff. Michael Bennett had great chemistry with Aaron Murray before hurting his knee. He is back, and I talked to him last week in Athens. Coming back from the injury, is it more mental or physical?
It's probably more mental, but I mean, honestly, I haven't really thought about it at all. I mean, physically, it's just as strong as it was, if not stronger. So it's like I don't feel it at all.
It's a good thing, though, that confidence doesn't seem to be an issue with you. You earned your scholarship here. You were a guy that nobody really knew about until you performed in front of Mark Richt. That's kind of been the way it's been for you all along. You've kind of had to fight the uphill battle.
Yeah. Like you said, nothing's been given to me. I want a highly recruited player. Obviously, wasn't really slated to start or do any of that. And kind of defeated the odds ever since I've been here. So this is just one more obstacle that was put my way, and with just a lot of prayer and a lot of hard work, it's been awesome, and I've been able to overcome it, and it's going to be a great year.
Deep receiving core, a lot of weapons on this offense. I guess you have to be patient and wait your turn.
Yeah, we got a lot of weapons, so it's kind of like, do we have enough to go around? But we have a lot of unselfish guys, and we just want to win. So bottom line, we're not really worried about who's going to get the most yards or who's getting the most touchdowns. It's just winning. So
chemistry is a funny thing. It seemed like you had it from the get-go with Aaron, and some guys it just takes some time. But for you, it was really comfortable. At least it seemed that way.
Yeah. Chemistry's huge, and ever since I've gotten here, we've had good chemistry. And then after I got hurt, we were working on month 6 when I could start running routes with my brace on. We were working every single day just to get that timing back down, and it came back like that. So again, it was like nothing ever happened.
How much do you, at this point in time, even think about Clemson?
A lot. I think about them a lot because they're game number 1. You cannot overlook them at all. It's a huge game. If we want to get where we want to go, we have to beat them. So you think about it a lot. I mean, on Twitter and on all that social media, on TV, everything, you just see Georgia versus Clemson coming in 20-some days. So it's constantly on your mind, and that's what drives you every day. I mean, are you working harder than Clemson? So,
yeah. You talk about social media. When you get to, I don't know, 48 hours before the game, do you try to shut everything down?
Yeah, well, Coach Rick says not to tweet. I think it's like 24 hours, 36 hours before the game. So we kind of stay off that. I just kind of, only people I want to talk to are my teammates and my family, and just kind of focus on the game as much as possible.
So there's Michael Bennett, and obviously he is a part of a very, very deep receiving core. Brandon Adams here with us on offensive interference, Malcolm Mitchell, Chris Conley, among others, and all of those guys are going to play along with Arthur Lynch and people at the tight end position, Jay Rome, major components, because this thing could be a shootout when all is said and done against Clemson.
Yeah, look, a lot of things in sports have a way of surprising us. I can't imagine us being surprised by the Georgia offense, them being anything other than what they've been advertising to be, scoring a bunch of points in that Clemson game and every other game, and I think Michael Bennett is going to be a big part of that.
I talked about Keith Marshall a little bit last week. I didn't recognize him. He's about 225, 230.
I've heard great things about him.
Solid muscle.
I have heard
he's huge.
Great things about him. As a matter of fact, I've even heard some people say, it was Gurley last year, but you may see, of course, he's still expect to have a great year, but you may see Marshall emerge more this year. They've really got a lot of weapons offensively. If you're a Georgia fan, it ought to be an awful lot of fun to watch.
Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to go out there next week. I'm hoping to have, or at least get about 5 minutes with Todd Grantham, because I don't know what they're going to do in the defensive backfield, especially at that safety position.
Well, look, at some point in time, I think in this city, in Atlanta, we got to start talking more about Todd Grantham. Here's a guy who makes $800,000 a year. And, he doesn't put his stamp on these games as much as I'd like to see him do. I've heard him interviewed on your shows over the years and different places over the years. He speaks in these cliches and it's time for
the
him.
NFL way. He's an NFL guy, and that's what they do in the NFL. They're not going to give you anything.
I don't find him to be an impressive person. And it's time for him to start being impressive in this Clemson game. Mark Richt had a quote earlier in the week where he was like, we're going to be pretty good by the end of the year, but those first couple games, I don't know. You don't get to say that this year. You played a soft schedule the last 2 seasons. You got to earn your credibility in this Clemson game, in this South Carolina game. I'm not saying you have to win them both, but you can't not show up for these two and then win the next 10 like you have the last couple of years. You can't do that. That's not good enough for Georgia fans in 2013. I hope they understand that.
Roddy Nabalsi from ESPN, the blogger who's been around the program for years, told me last week he thinks they're going to lose to Clemson and then bounce back and beat South Carolina. So if you win in conference, will that stave off some of the people that love to jump on Mark Richt?
Yeah, I think that at the bare minimum, winning one of these two games is going to be enough to kind of hold the Barbarians at the gate a little bit. But isn't it funny that we talk about SEC this and SEC that? Georgia doesn't seem to get the same benefit of that doubt going to play an ACC opponent in Clemson. If this was Alabama or, in most years LSU, we would assume that the SEC team would have the advantage because Georgia has played the softer schedule over the last couple of years, kind of avoiding some of those SEC behemoths and getting beaten up by South Carolina. Georgia doesn't seem to have that same SEC cachet going into a game against Clemson. I find that a little bit interesting.
And Clemson got pushed around against South Carolina to end their regular season, but then they bounced back in that Chick-fil-A Bowl and pushed around an SEC team, a good SEC team in LSU.
And that's sort of my point. People don't think Georgia's going to push you around. People view Georgia as a pretty good program right now, but they don't view Georgia as the kind of SEC team that comes in and bullies you the way that Alabama does, the way that LSU typically does, the way that South Carolina often does.
Poor Virginia Tech. Poor Virginia Tech. They're going to be in the wrong place at certainly the wrong time facing Alabama in that Chick-fil-A kickoff.
Yeah, look, this is what Alabama does. These first games of the season was against Michigan last year. It's been Virginia Tech a couple times. It was Clemson, years before where they just kind of come in and just beat you up because they got more talent than you. Nick Saban's got a whole offseason to prepare for you. It's a terrible position to put yourself in. No one plays the same level as Alabama.
You think Isaiah Correll's going to be in the NFL? I wanted to bring that up as well because a lot of people still feel like he's got the NFL talent. Is his head screwed on straight? Now, he says he's still rooting for Georgia. They're still his guys.
Yeah, look, I haven't seen him since he left Georgia, but when he was in Athens or in every game that he played at Georgia, I've never seen a kid shy away from contact as much as he did. God love him. I don't mean to speak ill of him, but after every hit, he's limping off the field. He's dodging contact. In the NFL, they hit you, and I don't think he likes to be hit, so I don't think he'll make it out of a training camp.
Mark Richt really learned a lesson that year. They were desperate to get some big names in coming off of that losing season. They brought in kids like that. And Nick Marshall, who's now going to be the starting quarterback, at Auburn, but don't forget, he was a defensive back at Georgia,
Sure.
and he was kicked off the team because he stole from his teammates. Those were the type of kids. They rolled the dice and thought that they could change some of these kids once they got them on campus, and boy, was it the polar opposite.
Yeah, I think the mistake that they made during that era was assuming that whether a kid has talent is the only thing that matters. The truth is, Georgia ought to be a school of such a stature that you should ask a kid have talent and also be able to keep his head screwed on straight for 4 years too. And most of the guys they've had the last couple years, the Gurleys and the Marshalls, these big name recruits seem to have both those components, which is what Georgia ought to be recruiting.
Here's what we don't want you to do. We don't want you to steal watches and sneakers from your teammates.
I mean, how do you explain that? I mean,
well, you don't. That's why you get thrown out of school.
And then, to bring that guy in, it's just a difficult thing to describe and explain.
Also, when you look around the SEC, we know that Alabama is there. Steve Spurrier trying to get South Carolina back to that point where they've been playing mind games with guys like Jadeveon Clowney.
Yeah, look, Spurrier's got an interesting situation because all of a sudden now he's been at South Carolina long enough, had enough success that there's a lot of attention. And, Clowney's one of these guys that obviously has all the NFL buzz. It's important for him to kind of keep that at bay in the offseason. That's what Spurrier, I guess, has sort of been trying to do.
Is he just one of those old guys now, Steve Spurrier? I mean, he spoke his mind when he was younger, but now especially, they say about old people, you say whatever is on your mind, you don't really care.
Oh, I don't think he cares at all.
He didn't care when he was young, let alone now.
Yeah, I think he cares.
I know where the bodies are buried. Click, clack.
I think he cares.
I killed a man. Click, clack.
I think he cares even less now because who's going to tell him anything? I mean, who's going to tell him to be quiet? Who's going to tell him to
dial it down?
Yeah, no one has that power, certainly in Columbia, South Carolina, maybe not anywhere. He is the guy who enjoys that freedom probably more than anybody does.
A few minutes, we're going to talk some wrestling, and I'm going to tell you it's the heel turn that could really put wrestling back to where it was as far as numbers, as far as interest.
I look forward to hearing this.
Back during the NWO days. I don't know if it's going to happen.
This is the conversation, by the way, that really matters.
Exactly. It's the most important part of the conversation. We'll do that in about 2 or 3 minutes. I wanted to bring up the Falcons real quick. Tony Gonzalez is back, and no one can complain about that, right? I mean,
no.
He's earned the ability to do what he wants to do.
It would be perfect sports talk to complain about it. It'd be a great podcast topic to say, who does this guy think he is? He's being treated different than his teammates. The fact of the matter is there's no juice behind that conversation because he is different. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's going to skate into the Hall of Fame. He's been to 1 million Pro Bowls. He keeps himself in great shape. If anybody's earned the right to be treated differently, it's a guy who has acted so differently for the scope of his career.
And he's going to be in shape.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that at all.
He's not going to be like, I don't know, pick your poison. What guy doesn't take care of himself?
Michael Turner.
Lincoln Kennedy. If you want to go old
Bob
school.
Whitfield.
All right, we'll talk some wrestling. It's called TNC, Brandon, the segment we're going to do.
What does the TNC stand for?
It's like TMZ, but it's
TNC for Nick.
Yeah, very good. You're catching on. Offensive interference. Stick around.
The Governor's Mansion, the St. Regis Hotel, and now Oxygen Financial. We are all located on West Paces Ferry Road. Come spend an hour with one of our private CFOs and get a financial plan in place for your future. Go to oxygenfinancial.net to set up a meeting today.
We're working on some music here on Offensive Interference. This is TNC.
Okay.
TNC, like TMZ, only BA?
It's N stands for knowledge.
No, we went over this already. First of all, knowledge starts with a K.
Right.
It's Nick.
The sad thing is that would have been
Nick Cellini.
That would have been so much funnier if I hadn't stepped on my own joke in the last segment.
Well, listen, it's a hit or miss business. I've been telling you that for years. Let's start with the 72 Dolphins meeting this week with the President of the United States. They didn't do it back in 1972 because Watergate was going on.
Surely they'll shy away from this appearance because the 72 Dolphins can't stand talking about themselves.
I know. They never. Mercury Morris and Bob Greasy.
Nick Bonaconte. Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's still with us. They never, ever, ever bring it up. Mercury
I can't
Morris,
stand the 72 Dolphins.
They have tried to downplay it, but you got to believe at least 2 or 3 or 4 of them, whenever a team is like, 10-0, 11-0, 12-0, what have you, they're doing the shit.
They strike me as the most bitter old men in the entire world.
First of all, that team would get crushed today. They get absolutely decimated.
Well, even
they
from
had no quarterback play. Earl Morrow was 98 years old. playing quarterback.
Yeah, because Greasy gets hurt fairly early in the season.
They played tight games throughout the postseason.
Yeah, Earl Morrall started in Super Bowl III against Joe Namath.
He did.
He's an old guy, right?
Yes, he did. He did start in that game, and he started the bulk of the season. They were losing at halftime in the first round of the playoffs that year against the Browns. They came back and won that game. They struggled against the Steelers, and then they only won 14-7 over the Redskins.
Well, they're not better than the historical Steelers. They're not better than the '85 Bears. They're not one of the handful of greatest team. What are
you crazy? But again, they're the only.
That was a little bit of a Tony
team.
Clifton you gave me there.
There's an artiste on stage. I read your schedule. I looked at your schedule. I was not satisfied. Anyway, Mercury Morris said, I'm glad we didn't go in 72. I heard those Watergate tapes. I guess Tricky Dick, Richard Nixon, dropped some N-bombs.
Well, let me just say this.
Tape.
He wasn't our first racist president.
Probably not.
Go back and read the history books.
Mercury Morris, have somebody escort you to the bathroom. You people steal.
He wasn't
What do you mean, you people? I mean Miami running backs. I don't trust you, Zonka or Kick. What did you think I meant?
He wasn't
I'm not a crook.
He wasn't our first racist president. Go look at some of Thomas Jefferson's earlier work.
Let's talk some wrestling right now.
Let's do that.
African-American wrestler Darren Young, before SummerSlam,
tell me the
tells
story.
TMZ he's gay.
So this is real. This is not an.
It's not a work. Kayfabe, I believe, is what they call it in the business. He's at baggage claim at LAX, and one of those videographers, if you will, from TMZ asked him, "Do you ever think a gay wrestler could
Wait?
come out naked?"
Hold on. Time out. He's famous enough to be bombarded by TMZ at an airport?
I guess so.
This is a setup.
Could be.
Come on.
Could very well be. Anyway, he slices, though.
Did you know who this guy was before this?
I kind of knew he was a part of the primetime players because I'm a loser that sits and watches wrestling.
But here's the thing. You are you're not an avid watcher of wrestling anymore, but you are a longtime avid fan.
Yes.
If you're not sure who this guy is, he's not famous enough for TMZ to...
You're right. The more I think about it, the more it may have been a setup. But he was on the Today Show then talking about it. And John Cena said, look, my brother is gay and I support him. Although Shawn Michaels said, look, we've known for years there have been gay wrestlers. No one has just come out publicly. It's kind of passé.
Yeah, wrestling unfortunately has sort of a dark history when it comes to gay wrestlers.
Far be it from
just
Shawn
Google
Michaels.
search Pat Patterson if you want to find out about that.
Far be it from Shawn Michaels, though, to be a dick about something.
Sure.
It's very out of character for him.
I'm glad that if this is real and this is the way he wants to tell his story, I'm glad this won't end well. Because everything in wrestling ends up getting played for cheap heat.
Well,
and this will end up getting played for cheap heat.
And we'll get to SummerSlam and those results in just a second, but I brought up John Cena. John Cena, when he comes back from his injury, tore his tricep, has to have surgery, out 4 to 6 months. He has to be a heel. You want the one storyline that's going to turn everybody on its ear in wrestling? He won't do it. He needs to do it.
Well, this is what...
He could just tell the fans. Remember, when Hulk Hogan started getting booed, when he was still a face, before he turned heel and went to the NWO, John Cena needs to do the same thing. Just come out and say, all you fans can stick it.
Sadly...
Get a plant in the stands, a little kid, rip his John Cena shirt. Tell the kid it's all.
Sure.
It all.
Sadly, I've spent
work out for you in the long haul.
I have spent way too much time thinking about this, and I actually have a pretty well-developed theory on this, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead. The floor's all yours.
If you don't mind.
Because this is the serious part of the conversation.
I think what John Cena should do, and this would be brilliant, if he turned heel to the adults and said these stupid kids are so dumb they'll keep cheering me, because they honestly still will. So it's like he's a heel to half the audience, but still a face. He's almost like the fake athlete to the kids who will pose for the picture, sign the autograph, but deep down doesn't really care. If he tried to walk the line of being a heel to the adults, which he kind of already is, but still sort of being fake and phony to the kids and getting their cheers, that would make him even more of a heel, which I think would be in a lot of ways more entertaining. Nick, to a certain extent, he's the most interesting wrestler I've ever seen, because when you watch one of his matches against a good opponent like a CM Punk, somebody that the crowd cares about, it's almost like a real sporting event, because half the crowd is cheering for him, half the crowd's booing against him. Therefore, there's action in the crowd the entire match.
He gets it because he knows he draws a reaction.
People legitimately care who wins his matches because there's this sort of deep feeling a part of the divide in the audience. It's really pretty entertaining.
Well, let's talk about his match, and we'll do that in a second. But first, as we talk about some of the SummerSlam results, let's talk about what was, from what I understand. I didn't get the pay-per-view because I don't work. I'm on the verge of being homeless, living in a dishwasher box. But that's neither here nor there. I didn't have the pay-per-view, but from what I understand, Brock Lesnar and CM
Yeah, I
Punk
heard it was great.
was easily the match of the night.
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of these pay-per-views
I love
anymore,
CM
but I
Punk.
still read about the sport for whatever reason, and I do love CM Punk. I wish I would have seen this match because it sounds like it was pretty incredible.
Paul Heyman is one of the great managers. Again, he draws a reaction, and he reminds me, and you brought this up, not knowing that I agreed with you. You texted me one night. You said, Paul Heyman reminds me of our old boss at 790 The Zone, Andrew Saltzman.
I know that only works for a small portion of our audience, but it is an uncanny resemblance.
Yeah.
He sounds like him when he talks, sort of looks like him a little bit.
Heavier than Andrew.
He is, but it's an uncanny likeness. It's really pretty odd.
He told CM Punk during Monday Night Raw this past week, come home. The prodigal son needs to return. And then Curtis Axel, if he's not Kurt Hennig's son, he's not getting a push at all. I don't get it.
He has no charisma.
I don't get it at all. I guess he's a nice kid. They're trying to do him a favor. But when he was on the verge of, in the ring, breaking the ankle, I put that in quotations, of CM Punk, Paul Heyman on the side yelling at CM Punk, you broke my heart, and now you're going to get your ankle broken.
Heyman is one of these great throwbacks to the old, because you don't see a lot of these kinds of managers anymore, but he sort of feels like that old Jim Cornette, Paul, Bobby Heenan vibe. He kind of feels like that, which is good. It's fun.
They do drug testing. So they say, right? There's a wellness program in the WWE. Have you seen Brock Lesnar?
Yeah.
The cup would disintegrate as soon as, never mind peeing in the cup, as soon as the cup saw his penis, it would disintegrate.
This is one of those things that I think they were more serious about a couple years ago. They were more serious about this a couple years ago. It seems like they probably backed off on this a little bit.
I'd say a little bit. They asked Brock Lesnar to count. He hits his foot on the floor like a horse. Then the other match, the match of the night, Daniel Bryan against the WWE champion, the aforementioned.
You like Daniel Bryan? You like him? You root for these underdog types?
He's got to shave that beard off. Enough is enough with that.
But this is what's popular now, though, right?
Like he should be holding
he's
a
like
sign on the side of the road.
He's like the Brooklyn hipster, right? He's like one of these guys that ought to be in the band Grizzly Bear or something like that.
I guess. I mean, I'm 46. I'm showing my age. I don't understand this.
But this is what young people like now, right?
The kids, if the kids prefer it, then the kids can't be wrong. Yes. But anyway,
I knew you wouldn't like him.
No, there's something about him I don't like. He is. He's like Rudy. He's 5'0". He's 100-0. I think I could take him. If I look at a guy and I think I could take you, but that's like Shawn Michaels. I've stood next to Shawn Michaels. I think I could take him.
But see, this is the thing that people like the wrestler that gives them hope. If this guy could be the champ, then maybe I could have been a contender.
Like I look at Jake the Snake Roberts, he'll suck my eyeballs out of my head. There's no way I could take him.
Yeah, he's just
Mick
sort of
Foley,
a demented guy. Yeah. But that's what people like about Bryan. They like the everyman vibe.
And the crowd certainly responded to him. He beats John Cena. Then, of course,
he was also a big guy on the indie circuit for a long time.
Oh, thank you for that.
It's always good when you can work the indie circuit into a podcast.
In the old days, they used to wrestle in Japan.
Sure.
Now it's the indie circuit.
Sure.
So he beats John Cena. The Money in the Bank situation is Randy Orton has the case, which means he can call for a title match anytime he wants.
Don't you love that gimmick? It's my favorite gimmick of all time. The Money in the Bank matches are good, and the guy who walks around the briefcase, that's a really good angle.
It's brilliant. So Daniel Bryan is celebrating his victory, his hard-fought victory over John Cena. He gave John Cena a black eye, too.
Yeah.
For real. And as he's celebrating, here comes Randy Orton. They hit his music. He comes out with the Money in the Bank briefcase, and Triple H turns heel on Daniel Bryan, gives him the pedigree. Next thing you know, Randy Orton comes in 1, 2, 3. He's the champ. They had a big coronation last night.
Well, there was
McMahon family. Of course, Triple H is married to Stephanie McMahon.
Right.
So it's
in real life.
Yeah. They have 2 kids together, what have you, 3 maybe. So it's Triple H, it's Stephanie, it's Vince McMahon in the ring, and Triple H with Randy Orton explaining to the folks why Daniel Bryan couldn't be a champion.
Which was a great explanation for why he did what he did.
The face of the WWE.
Because the WWE likes these sort of big hulking champions. He doesn't look like that. So that's what they would do in real life. They would try to upend his rise to the top because this is not good for business in their mind.
I'm doing you people a favor. It's amazing how short-sighted all of you are. You don't understand.
That's almost word for word what he said. But wrestling always works best when the storyline is sort of semi-plausible, and that's a semi-plausible explanation for what they did.
I think it seems to make sense. At the beginning of the telecast, Stephanie McMahon said, look, we need A or A pluses as champions. You're okay. You're a B plus.
I have a massive crush on Stephanie McMahon, by the way. Massive crush.
I think, what am I good at? I can stare at a woman and I
she's
can know
troubled.
Anything goes with her. I mean, you want to talk about daddy issues?
Just ask Randy Savage about that.
Exactly. But she was like, this is alleged. But there's a reason why, if you believe one of those rumors out there, one of those urban legends out there, there's a reason why the late, great Randy Savage
He's still not in the Hall of Fame.
and will never be in the Hall of Fame. Because I guess there was something going on between Randy and a 14, 15, 16-year-old.
This is all alleged, by the way.
It's all alleged, but that's one of those urban legends.
Well, speaking of internet scuttlebutt, there was some internet scuttlebutt at the end of the pay-per-view because supposedly you're not supposed to be able to cash in the Money in the Bank unless the champion is on his feet at the time. So there were some people online who had a problem.
There are some people that have way too much time on their hands.
With the fact that the WWE
No, he must be on his feet.
Not even following
he must be on his feet.
Not even following its own rules.
He clearly was not on his feet. Before we wrap things up, how tremendous was it last night when CM Punk started yelling at the fat guy?
I didn't see this. Tell me this.
It was outstanding. He came in and said, "I'm ready for a fight." And some guy kept booing him. And he said, "How about you, fatso? You want to come in here? Come on. Come on in here right now. I'll break every bone in your body. Come on, you gutless fatso."
I love
calling him fatso.
I love CM Punk.
Yeah.
He's my favorite.
He gets it. And then Paul Heyman came in and said, "Unlike that fat guy, I am not afraid to come in the ring." So, BA, it's always good to see you.
Always good to see you, too. A lot of fun.
Don't be a stranger around these
I will not.
Want to thank Patrick the Engineer, a name you know, a name you love. He is now aboard Offensive Interference with Nick Cellini. We'll talk to you later on in the week.